to the thought. So
okay, all right. I will.
We're live.
We are live. Are we?
We are.
Let's see. It says live on my end.
On my end, it says everyone can see and hear you.
Oh,
We're
great.
like two grandparents asking, "Is this thing on?" With our
this is our first time doing the live.
Is this
like
working?
This.
Is this working? Where are you?
I don't even know how to do. So
you're not started for me.
Chris is saying that it's not started.
It says the event will start soon. Wait for the host to start.
Okay.
Maybe you can.
I wonder if it doesn't start until 11:30.
Maybe that's what it is. Well, let's see when 11:30 hits if it's gonna go live. But it says it's live.
I'm in the show. Present.
Oh, yep, it's live.
We're live.
Yeah, I see it on LinkedIn.
Well, I don't see it.
Yeah. All right, well, let's do it.
Okay.
Is it going on your end?
No.
Can you refresh it, please?
Now you're live.
Okay. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to our show, Get Me Someone Who Can Sell. I'm your host, Olga Pishnyanka, and I have an amazing Adam Boyd joining us today as our first official speaker that I will be interviewing to showcase what does someone who can sell sound like, talks about, what do they care about. I just want to shine the light on those real sales talent that can make things happen. And Adam made a lot of awesome things happen. So that is the point of the show, is to really, like I said, showcase and ask questions. So those of you who either have to interview salespeople, either just got promoted into sales leadership roles and you need to learn how to do this, or those of you who are in sales and you just want to learn some secrets to success, you're in the right place, because we're going to learn a lot from Adam today on what that looks like and what to look for. So we have about 45 minutes. And let's see how it goes. So on that note, Adam, let's kick this off. So I've known Adam for a long time ago. He used to be a trainer of mine at Sandler long time ago. And since then, he's done many great things. He helped a lot of fast-growing companies in Austin achieve that status. And then he also worked after Sandler at various different companies. And lately, he's been... I hear some piano. I don't know if it's...
That's a child of mine.
Oh, perfectly fine. That's great. It's great. We need some practice. Anyway, and so since then, Adam decided, he's now training companies, B2B, and then also some of the law firms. So, and I'm sure you'll talk more about what you're up to and how we can find you later. But welcome. Thank you for being brave.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Awesome. All right. So let's kick this off with this thing. Sales. What interested you about sales? How did you know you're going to be good at them? And how did you get into it? And how, what made you think I'll give it a shot and I will do sales?
So I did not necessarily think, I think a lot of people go into it just believing they'll be good because they say, I'm social, I like to work hard, just get me in front of somebody, or if I believe in it, I can sell it. And there's some truth to some of those things, but I got into sales after business school, and it was sort of by accident. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I thought I had a business degree that will solve the problem for me. But I landed in training by accident, and I'm sort of stubborn. And I was working for a guy who became a mentor to me, a guy named Carl Scheibel. And Carl ran these events for CEOs. He called them executive briefings. And he said, hey, just put people in that. And I did that because I went looking for a place to learn. I said, I got out of business school, but I need to learn something very practical. And I asked Carl, I said, hey, can you teach me some things? He's like, well, you can come work with me for a little bit. And so I would cold call CEOs to try to put them into these events. And it was really painful. I was really bad at it. And I sat in a windowless room with a clock and a phone, and that was it. And I just banged the phone all day, got hammered, not drunk, but I got pounded because I wasn't very good. And it was more emotional than it was anybody yelling at me. but I hate quitting things. And so I said, I'm just going to lean in and figure this out. And I thought I would be with Carl for 3 months, and it turned into 9 years. So I, it was more of I don't know when to quit. So I just really hung on and really tried to get good at it. And the first 2 to 3 years were really painful for me because of a lot of things you work with people on, like some of the weaknesses. I should not have been in sales. I should have been, I don't, maybe in marketing, maybe in finance, probably finance because I'm not super operational. Um, but that's how I got there. And then I was like, well, I'm just going to kind of carve a path here and work at this because what you've seen and the reason you have the show is that there are a lot of really great salespeople, sales organizations, sales thought, sales leadership, but it's actually not common. A lot of times it's the part of the organization that really underperforms. And people just think I'm going to hire somebody magically and solve all my problems.
Right. Well, so you already said like at least three things that if those who are hiring salespeople got to pay attention to. So first, you said I wanted to learn, right? I was curious, and then
Right.
of course when Carl saw you, that's magical when somebody wants to learn, somebody's curious and
Right.
ready to like learn because I bet you made a lot of mistakes and
Oh God.
you didn't know right
still
away
do.
how to do this. And I know for Market Sense back in the day, to be hired by them, you had to go through a pretty like they didn't take just anybody to represent their brand.
I think
They
I
must have
basically,
seen something in you, you know?
I don't know, but he kept me around for a while and we had some fun.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So
So then you went from associate to partner, right? Which is a
Right.
big deal. And
Right.
so how was that track there? Did you make that track for yourself? Did you
no,
talk
I mean,
about
it was when I got there, it was Carl and John Oberg, whom a lot of people will know and you and I know and have a lot of respect for.
Love John.
I think he had made John a partner and then me, and then there wasn't really anything else. And it was because in that business, it's really hard to find. And if you look around those types of companies, it's really hard to find people who can both sell and deliver. And some consultants or owners in that space don't have the ability to let go and bring other people in. And Carl
Okay.
clearly did. So yeah, so he just basically was like, all right, this kid keeps pounding his head against the wall and he's starting to have some success. Let's maybe that was.
So
that was
when
his
you
thinking.
were so you were early in your career, right? Because that was that pretty much the first thing you did after
Business school, that's the first thing I did. Yeah. And
Did you
I did a
like-
little, yeah.
Did he meet you at Acton MBA? Is
So
that
he
how you
came and
met her?
spoke at Acton
Right, okay.
and he taught sales or a concept on sales. And really what he did is they have this assessment. If any of you, when you graduate, want to assess, come and talk to me. And I'll give
Smart.
you. And so I went and I was like, I was interviewing with a tech company and they wanted me to do all this research. And I was like, I'm not going to do a bunch of research. And I was kind of over, and I went and interviewed with Carl. And I looked at kind of the two paths. I thought, I'm not going to make a lot of money with Carl in the short term, but I think I'm going to learn more. And I looked at the tech company and I thought, they're going to offer me more money. I don't think I'm going to learn as much. In hindsight, there would have been really good structure with that tech company. But I'm pretty certain I learned more with Carl than I would have there.
All right. So you just said, so basically you're coachable, you want to learn, you're willing to make mistakes and learn from them. That's a huge, again, I'm just going to do little tidbits because those are the things you got to look for in the interview process. Is that person, look at Adam, he was proactive about something. He knew what was better for him in the long term. And those are some of the things that you got to look for. Now, that assessment, I want to have a completely new, different episode about that because I love that assessment so much.
Absolutely.
And so, okay, so now you are at Sandler, at Market Sense.
Yeah.
That was a Sandler franchise. You're one of the trainers. And so what was your cookbook? Because the subject of today's talk is the sales cookbooks, right? And kind of like, so what can you tell us, first of all, what, in your opinion, what is a sales book? I mean, a cookbook.
Yeah.
And kind of, was the cookbook given to you? Did you have to figure it out? Like, tell me at Sandler what that looked like.
So we had a methodology or an approach to doing that. And I still do this with clients today. And for those paying attention, like every rep who's been successful that somebody's going to hire should be able to walk through how to do this. It's really stunning. I still do this exercise with companies and the light bulb goes off for the first time with people whose livelihood is completely tied to what I'm about to share with you. But here's what I tell people to do, and this is what I was taught to do, and then we look at the inputs. But the output is, all right, how much money do I want to make? Right? Let's say I'm a sales rep and I want to make $250,000 a year. Okay. What I have to figure out is, based on my percentage commission or my bonus or my incentive plan, whatever it is, how many of those deals do I need to close to get my total on target earning? I need to know that number. How many do I need to close? For round numbers, let's pretend I'm pure commission. My average deal size is $250,000. It's 250,000 and I get 10% commission. If I want to make 250, I've got to sell 10 deals. First, before we do anything else, we have to know that. And then we need to back it through. Okay, how many deals am I going to get to the finish line are actually going to close or convert? Okay, and I probably should have a spreadsheet for everybody, but I don't. But
This is the chat. Yep.
I'm going to use really, really simple numbers. Let's pretend
simple.
50% that are closable are going to close. Okay, got to close 10. I have to have 20 deals. I have to have 20 deals in the pipeline at the closable stage. Okay. And I'm going to have a 50% conversion ratio and I'm going to have 20 there. All right. And then some people are saying, all right, I'm getting it. This is pretty simple. We'll keep backing up. Well, how many deals that are closable, how many do you need at a qualified stage to get there? Some people might have a shorter process. It might be 2 steps. Some might have 5. So I back it out. Let's pretend I discover, as I go through all of this, at some point, so let's just say I'm going to need 100 deals, because 100 prospects, 100 first meetings are going to lead to 50 second meetings, are going to lead to 20 qualified deals, and 10 that are going to close, right? I need to know that math, because that's what I live and die by.
Right.
Like, if I don't have that, I don't have a prayer in hell. And so you've seen this, I've seen this. Anybody who's listening sees this. There's always that rep who's like, I used to sell to a lot of people in financial services, and I'd always be talking to somebody, some producer, and he'd be saying, well, I've got this big deal. And when it hits, they had everything they bet. It's like, when that pony wins the Kentucky Derby. And I'd say, hey, look, man. And I would tell them, and they never did that deal hit. So what we need to know is, I need to look at the total thing. I was looking at a pipeline for a company recently, and I think I'm going to make up the number. Their quarter number was $5 million. They had a $5 million target. And they had like 40 opportunities in the pipeline, but I think like 25% of the total pipeline was one deal. And they thought they had enough coverage. They had like 8 closable deals, but the majority of it was in one, like had a big weighting toward one deal. And they were looking at pipeline coverage by dollar amount, not by total number of actual deals. So you think about that, like, well, if you're heavily weighted on one deal and that one falls out, you're toast. You're not going to hit your number. So you really don't have coverage. So, all right, let me go back. So let's say I need 100 opportunities. I need 100 prospect meetings in a year to get my 10 deals. If I just follow the math, it's going to happen.
Wait, hold on. Can I interrupt you for a sec? So for those that are watching, right, these numbers, if the company doesn't have them for you, because a lot of small companies may not have that data for you. So what you were saying is, you go in there, you start roughly somewhere, right? So you kind of decide for yourself, average deal size, this and this and this. So lots of assumptions. So it's not like somebody, I think a lot of people these days are used to just give me what I need to do. Well, those who are really good at sales, they don't need to be told what to do, right? So like, you kind of have to work your own math. Okay, just wanted to.
But it helps if you can find somebody who's been around a while and who isn't selling on relationships. Doesn't mean relationships aren't important, but you get people who've been in an industry a long time and they just get deals without actually having to go prospect and sell. Their numbers are always going to convert at a higher clip than someone who's got to go prospect cold.
So you couldn't take Carl's cookbook, for example, because Carl's cookbook was different than yours or John's.
And I'll tell you, so here's what happened, and both of them had really strong networks. It took me 10 years to get a decent network of my own. But what I did was I made estimates and I said, okay, I'm going to make this many phone calls. And I assumed if I make, and I can't remember what the math we came down to was. It was like, all right, if I make 5 calls, I'm going to talk to one person. Of every 5 people I'm going to talk to, I'm going to get one meeting. Of every 3 people I meet with, I'm going to close one. And so I kind of backed into that. I think the numbers, there's going to be some math whiz out there. I think I needed to make 40 calls. Did I have to have 40 conversations? 3, 15, 15, 45. I had to make like 45 calls to think that I'm going to close a piece of business. Right.
Right. So that's how you started. And then
yeah.
Okay. And then you started putting in what the actual things started to happen.
Yeah. So here's what I did. After 2 years in the business, I looked up, and I'm not like a genius. I just looked at every piece of business I closed, and I looked at all my opportunities, even the ones that didn't close. And I said, where did they come from?
Yep.
And I could find a certain number were coming from cold calls. A certain number were coming just from referrals I had nothing to do with. A certain number were coming from places that I had gone to network. Back when that was, I guess people still do it. But another number were from talks I'd given. And so what I had to do, and anybody who's in the marketing side, they need to be able to help with this. I was talking to a business owner the other day, and he said, hey, I need metrics from marketing. So if going to conferences or trade shows is part of your plan, how many leads do you expect? What makes a successful trade show? And so I just tell people, I always pick a number. I'm like, go have 3 good conversations, right? Now they have to know what to do with those. But I basically said, all right, networking events are going to give me X number of leads a year. And I would track that. And then I would say cold calls are going to give me 1. Referrals are going to give me 1. You might say LinkedIn is going to give me so many. And so you just kind of figure that out. The hard work doesn't come in building that plan. It's tracking and adhering to that plan.
Amen. And do you recommend, what was it? What was Excel sheet back in the day? Did you have CRM, or like, what's the easiest way for somebody to create something like that?
I think I would tell people to start with an Excel or Google Sheet or something inside of Microsoft Excel and start there. And then, I don't know who all's watching, but there's some people who, maybe you've got somebody in RevOps who can wire this up in your CRM. Maybe you've got a way to do it. I liked to track it manually.
Yeah.
Even though it created another tab I had to keep open, it was a little more work I had to do, but I just kind of like to be able to look at it and see. It's cleaner, it's simpler, it's probably easier to track it in your CRM, but you need some sort of dashboard that's going to tell you, are you on track or not? Even now, I track my work. I literally have a Google Sheet that I want to see it. I want to input it and make myself think about it, because it's another touch point.
Yeah. So you've been, early in your career, right? The associate, then the partner, then you moved to Bennett Place and you were a manager there. And then you have your own business, now. So you've done all these things.
Right.
Do you think there's a common framework when it comes to creating a sales cookbook? Or do you think it matters based on the industry, based on what role you have, or is there a simple formula that you then adjust? Kind of, what do you
here's the thing it's a great question. The thing about frameworks is it's a framework, and a framework flexes based on what you put in. So any business, we can talk to CROs, we can talk to sales-driven CEOs, and what you're going to find is they need to know, how much what do I need to produce? Okay.
Yep.
What percentage of that's going to come to me? Because we really start with what the person wants and how much they want to make. But how many do we need to bring in, at what size? And then how many are going to close? So we work it back through. This could be hiring people. This could be selling. This could be growing accounts. Frankly, it works in manufacturing as well. And then everything we have to figure out on the front end is, how do we just engineer enough inputs? Then the next phase of it comes down to reviewing your results and starting to identify, okay, what metrics do we need to adjust and what levers can we pull? So I was talking, people in professional services, one of the things I tell them is, okay, you can start to hand off work or you can raise your prices. And raising
Mm-hmm.
prices sometimes means going after a different customer. And now we get more bang for our buck. Um, you can start looking at where are we investing time to get leads? How do we need to adjust that? Once I realized that like the majority of my leads were coming from networking, I thought, okay, how do I make that better? I don't love to network. And
You're
I
great
joke
at
like, hey, it's like I'd rather be home with my family or working out or reading, but it's part of it. You got to put in the time. So how do I make it more effective? How do I make it more efficient? How do I get into better events that give me better quality leads?
So another thing you're talking about is how do you know when someone can sell? Is this kind of analytics, right? Then the mind is asking yourself questions like, how do I keep improving myself and making myself better and better and better, not just staying kind of where you
Right.
are, status quo.
And the
So
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I mean, the brain wants to find an easier way. And the brain also wants to solve a problem. And so you're doing something and you're saying, all right, how do I make more? How do I make it easier? How do I get more time back? Well, you start trying to answer the right question, which is how do I get better deals? How do I get deals to close faster? How do I get deals to, how do I get more profitable? Whatever it is, you start trying to solve that because what you're trying to get is more time, less work, more efficiency. And so you've got to figure that out. I will say this that I didn't mention on the cookbook, that concept is the thing that I see people forget is sales cycle. They have to account for the sales cycle. So I tell people, what's your sales cycle? If somebody says, I've got a 3-month sales cycle, I say, okay, anything after September 30th is not going to close in that given year. So I'll tell people if we're doing this in December for the following year, you have January through September to build your pipeline. And so you don't have 240 working days to build
Right.
it. You really have 240 minus those 3 months. And I actually tell people once something gets into November, you've really got maybe 5 weeks to work with to get something done because of time off, vacation, holidays.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk about the cookbook for Ben and Place. And I don't know how much you can share about that, but there you're already not an individual producer anymore. You are now a
Right.
sales leader, correct?
Yeah.
And so you came in and kind of what are some of the things that you're proud that you accomplished there? And then kind of how did you build it up to be that way? Because you were there for a while.
So one thing we did was we looked at the customer base, and the customer base was it was a blue chip set of customers. I mean, it was like name brands that everybody knows, really, really big companies, and there weren't a lot of those. So if we look at our TAM, your total addressable market, you look at your sales addressable market, your sales obtainable market. That's what the cool kids tell me. TAM, Samsung. So I'm learning those things, right?
That's the opposite. Yep.
We looked at it and you're like, well, there aren't a lot of those, and they're really big and they're really long sales cycles. And back then we had a thought, well, it's going to take a rep 3 years for us to figure out if they're going to make it or not. And I'm like, that's really expensive and it's a lot of time from a manager and it's opportunity cost. So the first thing we did is we kind of analyzed the market and we said, okay, if you look at like if we're on an XY axis, and I can't remember which one's X and which one's Y, but like this side over here, I'm gonna get on the window. This is like number of employees, right? And over here is number of companies. The fewer employees, the more companies you have. So there aren't a lot of companies in America with 50,000 employees.
Right.
But there are a lot more with 5,000 employees.
Yeah.
And we just kind of said, hey, I think there's this hole. Like we didn't have a lot of competition in this small hole. And I'm kind of taking this down a rabbit hole, but I'm going to show you where I'm going. And I said, okay, how do we get in? Like we can go sell a lot of companies over here that are smaller. They're big enough for us to make some money on, but they're smaller. And so here's what we did. We started by saying, all right, we think there's that. We said, this is large enough. We think we can go after it. And I started by sending cold email that I had written just to see, can I get leads? Because there was a belief in the company at the time, email will never get you leads. You have to cold call.
You start doing that as a manager.
Yeah. I was like, I'm
rolled
going
up
to
your
do it.
sleeves and you started doing something.
I'm just going to prove that it can be done because people were saying it'll never work. So I started getting leads, but not everybody would jump on the leads. And I was like, all right, I'm not putting up with this. So I basically started determining, all right, based on who responds to them, they're the ones who are going to get the leads. If you camp out on a lead, you don't get it. I'm going to cut you off. It's kind of like people who squat on accounts and they don't work them. You got to take the accounts away. So as much as we want carrots, we got to have some sticks. So we said, all right, I started getting leads. I would hand them off to the people who would jump on them and start building pipeline. And then what we did is I got to a place where like, this model works. We started closing some of these and I said, we're going to get some BDRs and I'm going to have them. And I think we got to a place where they needed to make 40 calls a day. And it probably took them 4 hours to make those calls. But I needed a large enough market. So we had moved down market and they started generating, if I remember correctly, I tracked it every week. I tracked calls they made, emails they sent, leads they created, conversations they had, leads that were created. And I did it by email and I did it by phone. And I wanted to know mathematically, what does this produce? And you can get a lot more sophisticated, but basically we're trying to build like a lead machine.
Right.
And it was 2 guys. They were a little different, but they worked really hard and they were just cranking it out. I think each one was sitting at like 5 to 7 leads a week they created. So we'd celebrate that and make the big deal. But then we wanted to say, all right, well, there's more. How do we get them? We just kind of listened to these guys, what's working. So we started running 2 webinars a month. And we just basically looked at the market and they said, we're selling HR. Not everybody in HR is wanting to be sold all the time. We said, okay, what about the ones that we're not getting? And so we started marketing these webinars that would be very educational. We weren't going to sell. And we told them there would be a little commercial at the end. And we did it. We would run these webinars. I think we had a list of like 40,000 companies that we would hit. It may have been smaller. I can't remember. It's been a few years, but we would generate 10 to 15 leads every webinar and then we would distribute them. So we had multiple ways. Then the people who showed up to the webinar, who didn't ask for a meeting, we would call back on and we had a plan there and that generated more leads. And so we just kind of built this machine.
Wait, hold on. So did you have a marketing department in that company? Like,
we did. Well, there was a woman who had done some creative, but there was no marketing. So we're just kind of like, we're going to do it because we need leads.
My point, exactly. Okay, great. So you are being resourceful and proactive and trying to figure out how do I generate leads so we can actually start closing. Yeah. And again, it's nothing complicated, right? You kind of look at this, just a couple of things that you need to track. So what were you able to accomplish? What are you proud of? Like, what are your
the company? It was a lot of fun because we would move really fast, and that's one of the things. People will have ideas, but the reason we could do this was I would write the webinars. I hired a woman for like $20 an hour to do the research. I had a copywriter who would get it to a certain point. I finished it. I could probably do that with ChatGPT now. And then we had a woman who would build the decks and do design. I could outsource that if I had to. I could probably build that in ChatGPT. So most people will say I have all these ideas, but they don't have the ability to execute. And that keeps them from sending the email, making the call, proving it out.
Yep.
Before we got there, the best year the company had was closing 15 new accounts. Now they were whales, but they closed 15. That year, the year we were really running on this and we had some hiccups, like some guys were like, hey, I want to go be a full cycle AE. And so I had to replace that guy and I had a hard time replacing him. We closed 60. So before they had done 15, we closed 60 again. Yeah.
Okay.
And we were putting them on the board and we had a product they gave away. We were able to charge fees for it. We didn't charge fees on all of them. We charged a lot. Just wanted to say, we want to prove it can be done.
And from the revenue standpoint, not just the accounts, and you don't have to tell me the number, but like what was the growth kind of revenue?
While I was there, it was interesting because revenue lags. So you get the account and then you implement and then revenue would lag. And we actually, the year after we had that number, we sold the company. So like actually in the year, we sold the company. We actually got to a point where we realized the company was going to be sold. And we're kind of like, are we motivated?
Wow.
But we, when I got there, I think the sales grew about 30%, like revenue grew. Profit grew by about 50% from where it had been. And look, they had a great business. All we were trying to do is prove we can shorten the sales cycle, we can make it less costly, and we can go bring on a lot of new customers. Because what we were trying to do is like, we don't want it to take 3 years to prove out a salesperson, and we want to give people career paths
Oh my
where they can go
gosh,
from
yes.
BDR to AE, and then if they want to go manage accounts, they can go manage accounts and grow them. So,
Well, you build a machine, and you build the machine by building a sales cookbook, basically, and figure out what activities do your people need to do,
right.
and track them and tweak them. So
Yeah.
we talked about activities, and I want to talk about law firms in a sec too. But I think one of the, and I brought up a little bit of, as we kind of talk, sprinkling here and there, about the mindset, right?
Yeah.
Because if you do the right activities, you can do them until the cows come home. But if your mindset is not that of a real salesperson, and by real, I mean who can actually sell something, it doesn't
Right.
matter what you do, right? So can you tell me about your mindset evolution, right? From the moment you graduated Acton to now? I don't know if it's a big,
No, it's great.
big place.
I'll do my best, and I'll ask you to reel us back in. Is everything okay?
Hold on, I think my thing just started. Anyway, sorry, I lost you because there's all kinds of things going on.
Yeah, I'll try to like meander my way there. So when I got out and I had to start cold calling, I was super nervous. I didn't have a lot of belief, and cold calls were hard for me for a couple of years after that. Even when I started having success. And then I started having the success, and I developed conviction that, hey, I can help. I think a lot of people who are calling on senior execs either have an imposter syndrome, or they have a sense in which they see this person as superior to them. And that's one of the hardest things to disabuse people of, is that like, this is a person, and very often you're more knowledgeable about what you're working on than they are. And what I had to develop over time was the courage to challenge and push back and grow. And I want to give a shout out to a friend of mine, a guy named Chris Sham. And Chris and I have done some work together, and his like genius is he can sell to CFOs of very large organizations, and he can ask for a ton of money, but he can do it really quickly. He can build the business case really fast. And it's not just here's an ROI worksheet that marketing cooked up. Like, he can sit there with them and talk finance. But even with Chris, like, Chris has challenged me to change even my mindset around money. So some of the big things are, your inherent belief in what you can do. Then it's got to be, you got to believe you belong, that you can help. You've got to have a real strong conviction around money, and how to ask for it, and how to fight for it, and how to challenge, and how to be able to walk away. And so I'm not a finished product, but when I graduated, I had a business degree. I had an undergrad. I'd gone to good schools. I didn't have the conviction I have now. It's now easier for me to sell $100 million company than it is sometimes a $5 million company. I just have a belief that it's easier, and that's changed. But I didn't have the mindset in 2010 that I could sell a $100 million company. I just didn't believe, I didn't see myself doing that.
So when it comes to mindset, for those of you that meet, there's such a big, wide thing out there. But really, when we talk about sales mindset, we talk about, how good are you with your emotions? Can you stay in a conversation, not get defensive? How good are you with your need for approval? Do you want to be liked, or do you want to be respected? Right. How good are you with money beliefs, right? Like, if you believe you can only sell $1,000 deal, but you're trying to get a job and selling $100,000 deal, you most likely have to do some work to do that. And then there's the sales cycle, beliefs, kind of like how fast you can sell, you believe you can sell, and somebody can buy. And then just some limiting beliefs in general, like I have to educate prospects and all that stuff.
Right.
So when I came to Sandler, I remember you guys told me to journal, right? And I thought, oh God, good Lord, why do I have to journal, right? And do you still journal, and kind of talk about like how, because one of my questions was, you have to constantly up level yourself, right? To go from, you went from an associate entry level to now you're helping CEOs, law
Yeah.
firm partners. I mean, you're working
Yeah.
with some of like really, big important people. So how do you use your journal or maybe other tools to constantly up level yourself and be ready for the next version of Adam?
Well, that's a great question. Look, I'll probably give you a better answer in a year, but I look at the places I'm uncomfortable and I try to identify the belief that's behind it and then rescript it. Um, so I'll say, one of them was, let me think about this. I was uncomfortable talking about money. And so I started journaling. I easily talk about money and I would try to get into a place where I felt comfortable talking about money. And look, this isn't sitting in your desk doing yoga and meditating for hours on end. It was just sort of like a 5 to 10 minute practice a day of trying to give myself a new talk track. And I worked on that and I started taking risks and calls by asking about the economics of the business, what's at stake. And that built the conviction to talk about money. But now what I do is I do the affirmation thing. And it's usually in an area that I know I want to see better results and I want to have better feelings because the feelings are going to drive our actions, which are going to drive our outcomes. So I can choose to act a certain way, but I have to work a little bit on how I'm feeling and what I'm believing. I do some visualization, not as much as I would like, but I kind of say, all right, what do I want it to look like? And one of the things I picked up from the guy who wrote 10X is easier than 2X.
I'm reading that book now.
Dan Sullivan. He
Yeah.
talks about wanting. And so I've started getting clear on what do I really want? And then what do I want to visualize that it's going to produce in my business, my work with clients? And then what do I need to believe to get there? So these are things that I'm working on. I also have like a spreadsheet where I track every week outcome, inputs and outputs so that it can help me work through that. So these are some of the ways I do it. I also go to therapy.
I know we can talk probably about mindset. We can have another session to do it, but I think that's one of the most undervalued things when we interview people is we focus on their activities, but we're not focused on, can this person handle the pressure? Do they have thick skin enough? Or can they go and have conversations with CEOs, right?
Right.
And it takes a lot of awareness to do that. So you do journal mostly every day, kind of. That's your.
I do
to this day.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do it. I'll do a little gratitude at night, and it blends for me into my faith and spirituality. But I'm also like, what am I visualizing, and what do I want to be? How do I want to show up? What do I want to feel? I cold called in 2008 on a guy named Cole Harmonson. You probably know Cole. And,
very well. He's awesome.
2 years later, about a year and a half later, we ended up starting to do some work together. So you just never know where those cold calls are going to lead. And I probably picked up another 10 clients over the next 7 years from just Cole's recommendations. And they led me to another 10 clients. But it was one call that did that. And I learned a little bit about how Cole journals, and that's influenced how I journal. And there's a guy named Jeff Holtz, who was an EO in Austin. And I brought in some of how Jeff journaled. And so I was always looking for, all right, what do I need to think? And then at one point I had like this very long, unwieldy journaling template. I was like, all right, I need to get back to just a few things and a way of talking to myself. So
in Sandler, we talk about mindset, and you probably remember this better than I do. So mindset, behavior, and technique.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not going to go into technique too much because that's a whole other different show.
Yeah, it's a different thing.
I really want to care more about the behaviors and mindset on here. So now that you work with law firms, right? Because it's probably when I think of law firm, I don't think sales. I think it's service. It's usually not, again, my experience, right? Not super well organized. And now you've been working a lot with that kind of industry. Do you think everything we talk about applies there, or is there any caveats? Like, what are some of the successes that you've had, like there?
I'll give you an example, and this was more about. So I do a lot of the B2B work, and what I found is I got referred into a law firm, and I was talking to an owner, and he was really dialed in on his metrics, and not everybody is. If you're not dialed in on your metrics, it's hard. But he kind of looked at the numbers and said, if I can increase my close rate by 10%, I double my cash flow. Had a lot of respect for this guy because he's become a friend. Really, really tremendous operator, and he would have killed at anything. He just happened to go into law. And he says, "Hey, look, I have a legal factory. That's what our job is. Inputs,
Mm-hmm.
outputs, just pound it out." And I started listening. I audited some of their calls, and for me, it's a way to identify where the problem is. Usually, they're all in the same place, but you got to check. Kind of like it'd be malpractice not to. And what I found was that the law firm, depending on the business model, is a subset of the problems in or the challenges in a sales conversation. And so what we looked at was, for this law firm, it was basically a one call close. So you and I, we work with enterprise reps or mid-market reps, and it's like 3 to 6 months. Well, they did everything in one call. And what we had to do was re-engineer the structure of the call. It's effectively a set of behaviors in a call.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what you do and when you do it, and here's how you have to change. And one of the challenges there from a mindset standpoint is they believe their job on the call is to solve the problem. Well, if you're in professional services and you solve the problem before they become a client, you don't get paid. Somebody's going to argue with me about that and say, well, you got to get value, get value, get value. But
That's America. They can argue with you. Yep, that's right.
yeah. But we had to change their mindset so that their job was to build a relationship and listen and understand and not just find out about the legal matter, but also find out how it affected them. And when we changed that, over 5 months, we didn't quite double. We took their close rate, we increased it by about 70%. And then they raised prices 15%. So if you think about that, same number of leads, same marketing spend, but now you're closing almost twice as many. And then you've got more falling to the bottom line because they raised prices, right? With no margin, like no increased spend, you become more efficient and more profitable. And then what we eventually did was we kind of templated it and we said, let's take the lawyers out of this. And we started hiring salespeople and dropping them in. In another law firm, it's a much longer sales cycle because they're B2B.
Yeah.
Maybe L2B. And so we just built out a template and we said, this is what you have to do. Every month you have this number of conversations with target accounts. And we had to specify conversations, target accounts about work because people would enter, well, I had so many conversations. Well, if it's not with a target account, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And if it's not about business, it doesn't matter. So we had to specify that. Well, they're on track. Like they're hitting their goals for the year because they're having the conversation, work's coming in, they're building
magic.
Well, it's like, hey, you go to the gym, you eat right, you sleep, you don't drink so much.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's why I want to start shining more attention on the sales cookbooks because there's so much mumbo jumbo out there. Yeah. It really comes back to really simple things. So you are clearly a hunter, right? You've got a very hunter mindset.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the most motivating compensation plan, right? So people, and I don't need to know like numbers and all of that.
Yeah, no.
But what do you think? Because that's one of the questions I get asked a lot. It's like, well, how do I compensate a hunter? Like we can't afford, like we're a small company, we can't afford, paying them a big base and this and that. But I also say, you can't just have a commission only for a B2B business. So in your experience, and you've managed people and you've sold yourself, what do you think is there like a formula for this, or is the answer?
Well, so the first answer, which no one's going to like, is you have to find, in a perfect world where this wouldn't destroy RevOps and finance, everyone would have their own comp plan based on their motivators in their market. But I actually talked to a guy recently. His company had 85 sellers and they had 53 comp plans, and they've gotten it down to 4. That was a nightmare to figure out comp, and no one understood their comp plan. So most people over a year. So as a rule of thumb, I believe it's important for hunters, you have to get them through a certain period of ramp time plus the time to build their pipeline. And so I just make it up. Let's say the sales cycle's 3 months and it takes 3 months to ramp and then like another month for margin. They need a good 7 months to be building so that they can get into commissions. And also, like, hey, if they don't get paid commissions until 3 months after it closes, you need to build that in. And so I like to see comp plans personally where there's a little bit of a deadline to start making money and start producing. I like to see comp plans that track two numbers. One is number of deals, one is volume. And that's not like I'm not going to die on that hill, but if you kill it on one deal and you've hit your number for the year, do they have motivation to keep going? Two, if they're bringing a lot of deals but they're too small, everybody says, well, so I like a little bit of stick, but I also like to see, can you start making money? So I'm talking to a guy the other day, friend of mine, and he loves to hunt. And he's so fun, and he's hit his number. Like, I don't know what their calendar year is. I think he hit his number like a quarter in to the year. And the manager said, "You're not going to stop." He says, "No." He's into accelerators. He's like, "I'm into accelerators. I'm making real money now. I'm not going to stop." So if you work with Olga and you hire the right people who are motivated and you build the right plan, which rewards them for going above and beyond, when they're more profitable for the company, they'll keep going. So the other thing that I want personally, selfishly, is I want to be able to make more money every subsequent year than I did the year before, as long as it works for the company. So I know you've got to be able to adjust comp plans based on how the market's changing, what you're seeing, how they're adjusting. But I want people to find a way to be able to make more money because, you make 200, now you want to make 250. You make 250, now you'll make 3.25. You make 3.25, now you want to make 450. And so they keep pushing, and that's really how they're measuring their success. So
this is an amazing answer.
This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for sharing. So here, I'm going to start wrapping this up for the sake of respecting your time. I can talk to you obviously for hours, and there's so many more questions I wanted to ask. But so to wrap this up, I want to kind of highlight a couple of things here. I asked Adam some questions that we typically ask in a second interview and then kind of technical audition interview where we really drill into the numbers. And as you noticed with Adam, he was very specific about numbers. And even if he couldn't come up with exact number, he was able to walk me through things. And that's what you want in your salesperson is you don't want them to be vague. You want them to be more specific and exact. And because they're going to keep multiplying or replicating the formula. You want the formulas, you want the frameworks. And Adam has demonstrated beautifully today what that should look like. So the questions that you ask is always kind of, does the math make sense? Is there anything that kind of comes up? And nothing that Adam was saying was like, wait, it doesn't make any sense. Everything made sense. He also pointed out the compensation plan. A lot of times, the way I know a salesperson may not be that great, if we get so stuck on the base, but they're not asking about, I want to make this much money. Can I make this much money in this company? Adam demonstrated that as well very beautifully, because at the end of the day, if your salesperson is not motivated to make money that they want to make, no matter what kind of whips or carrots or sticks you have, it's not right. It's just not going to matter. Anyway, so those are the two little highlights I wanted to shine the light on, because Adam just, if I interviewed Adam as a second interview, he'll definitely make it through to the next step. Of course.
Good. I might need that.
You're welcome. Anyway, so to kind of sum it up, if you're not signed up for Adam's newsletter, it's fantastic. I saw it this morning. You're always funny. You're always edgy. You're always sharing something you're reading. And that's fascinating. So if you're not signed up for Adam's newsletter, please do so. I'll put it in the comments after the live.
Awesome. Thank you.
And tell people how they can find you and how they can work with you, or what do you want to know?
So you can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm the Adam P. Boyd at, however my handle looks, but connected to Olga. So if you look at mutual connections, you'll see me there. Our website is thenorthwoodgrp.com. Sometime in the next couple months, we'll go through a refresh on that, but you can find me there, and you can find me on LinkedIn, and I typically engage with people there. And
all right.
Yeah. Be happy to
and to end this up, what advice would you give yourself when you first started? Just very brief, 30 seconds. What do you wish?
I would say do the hardest things possible and do them now, because you're either going to deal with short-term pain or long-term suffering, right? And I don't think that ever changes. John Dutton from Yellowstone said, all of life is a test. And I think the sooner you can go through how hard it is, the sooner you get through to the other side and get to your next
I love it.
challenge.
I love it. You're so inspiring. I
Well,
really
you're
appreciate
kind.
you being
I feel like
here.
it's a mutual admiration society. This is great.
Well, thank you. So thanks for coming. Thanks for showing up. I'll be doing this every week. I'll be highlighting amazing salespeople that have come to my life. Some of them will be like Adam sales leaders. Some of them will be individual contributors. But I really want to shine the light so you guys can see what that sounds like and looks like. And appreciate you for showing up. And I'll see you all next week. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Bye.
Bye-bye.